The opening two chapters of Job have always fascinated me, particularly regarding the encounter between God and Satan. But this encounter has always raised questions in my mind. I had been told that God cannot be in the presence of evil, and yet there he was consorting with the prince of evil, Satan himself. And I was baffled by that interaction. Why was Satan allowed to be among God and the sons of God? And most baffling, why would God ask Satan for his opinion regarding Job? I mean, Jesus made it clear that Satan is a liar. In fact, he is the father of lies, Jesus said. So what truth did God think he was going to discover by asking Satan his opinion? Why would God engage in any conversation with the father of lies? Well, needless to say, this encounter between God and Satan always was troubling to me. But then I discovered something that completely changed how I understood this encounter. And here is what I discovered. The Satan in the first two chapters of Job is not the devil. The Satan that we read about in the book of Job is not the devil that we encounter in the New Testament. Wait a minute. Are you serious? I mean, it seems fairly obvious that when you're reading the text, Satan is there and he's there with God. This is what you read. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Well, how much clearer can it be? I mean, the biblical text states clearly that Satan came before the Lord together with the sons of God. So how can you say that this encounter is not about the devil? Well, I can tell you this. This encounter has absolutely nothing to do with the devil, and I can prove it to you. When you take a closer look at the Hebrew grammar, you will begin to see a different picture, a very different picture. Let me show you what I mean. Let's begin with the word Satan in this text. It is the Hebrew word Satan, and it means something like a prosecutor or accuser. It speaks of an official legal function within a ruling body. The Hebrew idea of Satan would be like a district attorney in the modern world. Now, here is where the Hebrew grammar is of great help. That Hebrew word Satan is not a proper name. It is not a proper personal noun, and as such, it does not point to a specific figure, particularly the figure that we know in the New Testament as Satan. How do I know this? Well, in Job 1 and 2, the Hebrew text uses the definite article with the word Satan. Job 1:6 literally reads this way. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came among them. Note that now you see the definite article, the, together with the noun, Satan. What you're reading is not a personal name, but a job description. Look at it. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came among them. In biblical Hebrew, the definite article the is used to make a common noun specific. And our English language works exactly the same way. When you place the definite article before a noun, that is, you put the word the before a noun, you make that noun more specific, more definite. For instance, take the English word man. To be more specific, you use the definite article and you have the man. Well, the Hebrew is exactly the same way. In Job chapter 1 and in chapter 2, because you have this word Satan used in that way, the writer is not talking about Satan, an accuser, in a general sense, but rather he's talking about the Satan, a specific accuser. In other words, when you put the definite article in front of that noun, Satan, you're no longer talking a general Satan, you're talking very specific. This particular accuser, this particular district attorney, this one who is a member of God's divine council. Because remember, this Satan, this very specific Satan, comes in with the sons of God. They are part of God's divine council. This DA, or prosecutor, if you will, has come before God together with all the other sons of God. Now, let me point out one more important rule in Hebrew grammar. Like English, the Hebrew language does not use the definite article with a proper personal name. It does not allow a proper personal name to be preceded by the definite article. What do I mean by that? Well, let me illustrate with English. I would never call myself the Tracy. I mean, that just sounds silly, the Tracy. With a proper personal name, the definite article is never used. I am specifically Tracy, but I don't refer to myself as the Tracy. I'm just Tracy. And the same is true in Hebrew. It uses the same grammatical rules. And as we've seen, this word Satan, used in Job 1 and 2, it does have the definite article. It is the Satan. What we see is a specific member of God's divine council, a divine being whose job description is that of accuser. He is the district attorney, if you will, within God's divine council. In Job, the Satan is not a bad guy. He is not the villain in this story. The Satan is doing the job that is assigned to him by God. He is the accuser, the prosecutor, the DA, if you will, the district attorney. And when God asks him where he has been, what we see is the Satan has been investigating what has been happening on earth. This is what we read. The Lord said to the Satan, "From where have you come?" The Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it." The Satan has been doing his job. He has been roaming throughout the earth to see whether or not human beings are obeying God. So God poses this question to the Satan. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." God is bringing the job description of this divine being into play. What God is doing, he's asking the DA, the district attorney, if he had taken a closer look at Job. Was there anything in Job's life that the Satan could accuse him of? And clearly, this divine being is not the devil of the New Testament. The Satan in the book of Job is the prosecutor. He is the accuser. This fact becomes even clearer when we read the Satan's response to God's question concerning Job. Then the Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." What's going on here? The Satan is getting uppity with God. He states without reservation that Job's righteous behavior depends entirely on God blessing Job abundantly. The Satan is telling God that he does not agree with his assessment of Job. Even more, the Satan is asserting that God is ignorant of Job's character. And this disagreement Concerning Job's character, this is what sets the stage for the suffering that Job will endure. Now keep in mind, the Satan is not the villain in this story. He is the prosecutor. He is the accuser. He is the DA, if you will, in God's divine counsel. The Hebrew word Satan is not a proper personal name. So why then do so many believe that the Satan in Job is the Satan in the New Testament? Well, here's why. This showdown between God and the Satan in the book of Job has led many to believe that this divine being was in fact Satan, the devil that we read about in the New Testament. This is why you see Satan in Job capitalized in so many translations. When you're reading it, you don't read the Satan, you just simply read Satan, capitalize, because that's how they see it. But as we've seen, the Hebrew word Satan in Job is not a proper personal name. It is a job description. And here's what's even more interesting. The Hebrew word Satan is never used as a proper name in the Old Testament. In almost every use of Satan in the Old Testament, you always find it with the definite article in front of it. This word, Satan, together with the definite article, the, describes a job description. It does not call for a proper personal name. Yet in the New Testament, the devil is called Satan, or in the Greek, the Greek word is literally this, it is Satanas, a proper name. In the New Testament, the definite article is never used with Satan. The reason being is that in the New Testament, Satan is a proper name. So, how did the proper name Satan come about in the New Testament? Well, here's the answer. The New Testament writers, as well as Jewish writers in the centuries leading up to the New Testament, they saw the serpent in Genesis 3 as the great enemy of Eden, and by extension to the world. And they saw this divine being as one who actively and aggressively opposed God's will. The serpent in Genesis 3 was never called Satan or the devil. When you're reading in that 3rd chapter of Genesis, the word Satan or the word devil is not there. But the New Testament writers, together with the Jewish writers, saw the serpent as the starting point of heavenly and earthly rebellion. And as a result, they viewed this serpent as the adversary of adversaries, the accuser of accusers. Thus, Jewish writings began to adopt Satan as a proper name for the serpent figure in Genesis 3. And the transformation of this word Satan into the proper name Satan became the norm in the 1st century. But the Old Testament never, ever uses the proper name Satan for the divine rebel in Genesis 3. The Satan we read about in Job, that is not the devil. He was the prosecutor, the DA, or the district attorney, if you will, in God's divine counsel. Well, at this point, you may be saying to yourself, okay, but what's the big deal? Satan is a job description in the book of Job or in the Old Testament, but a personal name in the New Testament. Does it really matter in the end? Well, yes, it does matter. And here's why. When we read our Bibles, we are being invited into the world of those who wrote it. It is their world, not our world. And if we're going to make sense of what we're reading in the Bible, we have to understand the biblical writer's point of view. We need to understand his worldview. Because if we do not understand his worldview, we are likely going to misunderstand what we're reading. And the trap that ensnares many Bible readers is the idea that we want this book, the Bible, to be relevant to us. But this is reverse thinking. In order for the Bible to be relevant to us, we must first be relevant to the Bible. We need to get the heads of those ancient writers, those first century writers, and even going back even further, those ancient Hebrew writers. We need to get their worldview, their way of understanding the world into our heads so that we can see it as they saw it. Because remember, when we are reading our Bibles, we're being invited into the world of those who wrote it. And when we begin to understand the Bible from their point of view, when we allow that worldview to prevail and to guide us in our understanding of what's being read, when we do that, the big story of the Bible comes alive. And when we see that story, that big story, we can then discover our place in that story. That's why what is going on in those first 2 chapters in Job, that's why understanding that Hebrew word Satan, that's why it matters. We are now seeing and understanding it from the perspective of the writers who wrote it under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Well, listen, I hope this has been helpful. I do love looking at text and taking them apart and trying to understand what exactly is God saying to us in this particular text. And if this has been helpful for you today, would you take a moment just to hit that like button? And also, if you've not yet become a subscriber to this channel, I would appreciate it if you would just hit that subscription button. That allows you to be notified whenever I'm putting out a video. And the truth is, I'm putting out a new video every week. I'm looking at a new text every week because my goal is not only to help you, but also to help me as we dive into this amazing book called the Bible, the Word of God given to us. Well, listen, thanks so much. And as always, God's very best to you.